Well, welcome everybody. I'd just like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, which are the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I'd also like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and also recognise that sovereignty has never been ceded. I also wanted to begin as well, considering we're in this show and in the presence of so much language, and to consider that language is such an important part of this body of work, to also kind of recognise the more than 250 Indigenous languages and including 800 dialects across this continent, Indigenous languages, and acknowledge these languages' resilience and their vibrant life and the connections that these languages provide for Indigenous people to country, culture and ancestors. It's my pleasure to be here today with Darcey Bella Arnold, the artist of A Measure of Disorder, and my name is Tim Riley Walsh, and I'm the Curator in Residence at Gertrude. So we're here and we're going to be chatting a little bit about the show, and it was a real pleasure to chat to Darcey over the course of the development of this body of work, which has been, that conversation has been going on for sort of been almost a year that we've been chatting through it since I arrived. So it's been a total joy to kind of see that materialise and shift and develop. So I'm looking forward to chatting more about that. So for Darcey, the subject of language has been a sort of a consistent interest and sort of its attending systems. And underway in this new body of work is this kind of ongoing development of this interest and kind of engagement as well with art history through references of the work of René Magritte, Louise Bourgeois, and connections as well to sort of concrete poets and sort of the work of Mike Parr as well. So it's exciting to be able to chat a little bit more, and I thought maybe as a way to start we could speak a little bit about two repeating kind of words that are in this show and kind of how they emerged and how they came to you and why they kind of caught your attention. And obviously those two words are atrophy and entropy.
Yeah, it's atrophy and entropy are some of my mother's favourite words, which she uses daily in written and verbal communication. And I guess my work for the last 5 or more years has been centred around my relationship with my mother, who's got this unconventional use of language. And those words kept kind of coming up again and again, and have done for the past sort of 15 years. She'll use atrophy in sentences and create their own context for them. And for something to atrophy is for to break down, like a muscle will atrophy, like the imagination will atrophy from lack of use. And similarly, entropy is the law of the universe, the second law of thermodynamics, which is the disorder, or order to disorder sort of thing within the universe. So they're not dissimilar, the two words. And I find that really interesting that they're also some of her favourite words as someone with a neurological difference, that the word atrophy would be one of her most used words. Is pretty amazing and intriguing, and that they're not phonetically dissimilar either. Atrophy, entropy, similar looking, similar sounding. So I just started with those two words and then thought that would be a nice beginning point into research and into building a show around those two words, and just then followed the research into all of these sort of different places.
And what was that sort of research process like for you? Because I know that there was this kind of lived experience and this kind of recognition of this word, in your family and certainly of interest to Jennifer. But sort of what process you go into kind of dig into these words and sort of look into them more, and how did that kind of influence the work?
Yeah, sort of researched and made at the same time. Kind of the research rolled into the work and the work rolled into the research, sort of. So atrophy is like a beautiful looking word, and then entropy, it was really interesting, like learning about the science and the physics behind it, which is not my field at all. And so I started collecting the research of like, I think you can see like there's chemistry equations, and I kind of, within that research, like pulled it all together in a PDF. So I had this kind of reference point when I went to the canvas. So I've got this chemistry equation or this physics equation, or the symbol for entropy is S, which I, I'm just learning. And I don't think you're going to learn anything from looking at the paintings. But I like the language, and it's like there's so many languages that you can pull from and use them in this sort of concrete poet style, like of, collating the composition. And I thought it was kind of funny creating a PDF of research, like trying to control or order the disorder of inspiration. So it's like just following these two words around and then trying to put it all together in a PDF, so I've kind of got it there for when I want to make stuff, so it doesn't kind of just disappear.
I was curious as well, because there are a lot of, as well as kind of these equations, there's an interesting kind of clocks and
time. Well, entropy is a measure of time. Entropy requires time, so it can only go forward with time. And a way of measuring time historically has been like the burning of a candle or incense, so it's like the disorder as a measuring device. So I thought time was really important, and like having a clock in the space as a reminder of the passing of time is a kind of morbid play on entropy, that entropy is always at work, to remind the audience of that in a way. And I love the clocks. I mean, clocks are beautiful. Like, it's another text device in a way, as an object. Yeah.
And the presence of kind of text with clocks as well, because I know there's some Latin phrases.
Yeah. So they're the Sundial mottos. As I was looking into time, I was thinking about how, time has been measured previously, and sundials have these fantastic mottos that are quite sad and funny. Like, one of them is like tedious and brief, which I thought was really, quite morbid and funny, and like time flies, tempus fugit, time flies, like as another text device. Or like the one behind the desk that's it escapes irretrievable time. I thought it'd be funny, having a running clock. Like, I don't know. So just following it. And that came quite late in the development of the show. It just kind of rolled in, and then I wasn't sure if they'd be in the space. Like, once you get in the space, you decide what's going to be here in terms of the install. But so a few of them have ended up, like the one on the back of the painting have ended up here. Yeah.
And then of course there's one in the window box at the front as well.
Yeah.
So for anyone wandering down Glasshouse Road, they can sort of see the importance of the clock to kind of body of
and also the Guston clocks as well. Like bringing those art history kind of references in. Yeah.
And so this kind of process from, I guess, a lot of kind of reading and kind of compiling of information into this document, and then that sort of jump from reading to making. How did that kind of go for you? Were there sort of particular kind of materials or sort of processes in the studio and the process of making that kind of helped you kind of make that jump from reading to kind of creation?
Well, having the PDF there, so I knew I wanted like an entropy painting. This is an anti-entropy painting, but an entropy painting, an atrophy painting. So I kind of made those decisions early on of like what objects I wanted, and then I had the PDF to kind of just as a toolbox to sort of just play with imagery. And what was I going to say about? And I decided quite early on about my materials. Like I decided on a palette, sort of like, so I had the orange, which I was working with previously, and cream and dark text and the plaster. So I kind of limited the palette in a way to unify the body of work, because I felt like the research was kind of going everywhere. Like when you're talking about laws of the universe and all this stuff, it's kind of wild. It was going outreaching. So I was like, I wanted to contain the show within itself with the materials to unify. So keeping those restraints in. There's a way of just making it a bit easier.
And so there's kind of more these kind of familiar kind of subjects, like the bricks, and could could you talk a little bit about the bricks and the process of like what drew you to kind of this? And I know it's something that you've used previously in your work, but also in the context of this body of work, it's sort of changed somewhat, hasn't it?
It was kind of exciting when I was researching entropy. One of the main infographics that are used is like a pallet of bricks falling off a truck, and that it will always be disordered, like it will never fall in an ordered manner. And because I'd been using bricks so much in my practice, I was like, oh, this is wonderful. I can make some physical bricks and do like an ordered pile and a disordered pile as like a visual description of entropy. And then it's also another text device. Like bricks traditionally have like a stamp at the top that's called a frog, and that is like a twofold device that is the maker's mark and the place sometimes of where the clay has come from. So I've done my initials and my mum's initials, just kind of, not that people would know that, but it's kind of like, as a way of bringing text into it, and then the text either side. And I made them from slip cast and plaster, and then sanded and painted each one. And there's about 70 in the space.
And that's going to be something that maybe will continue, those bricks?
Yeah,
cool.
I think so. Yeah, they're pretty fun to play with,
And then, I mean, continuing with this idea of kind of familiar sort of spaces, and you were saying that it's thinking about the universe and kind of physics and these things which are kind of like maybe hard to kind of grapple with, in terms of scale. These beautiful stands that you designed as well. What was your sort of process of thinking about that?
Well, kind of, I guess, thinking of pedagogical language, of visual language of, classrooms and that kind of thing. But I was also thinking of this space, like it's quite, it's longer than it is wide. So I was thinking originally of maybe hanging paintings to kind of get them off the wall. But then that would have been quite tricky. And so then the idea of the stands came up to build them, and then I can move them around myself, and it's more of an independent kind of install. And I like them as an object, thinking of paintings not just as paintings but as objects or sculptural, and like then being able to link that into the bricks. Sort of, again, just sort of thinking of the installation as a whole.
And I think as well the thing that was really rewarding to sort of see during install, and I know that it was part of your plan, was that they also become they create rooms within rooms as well.
Yeah.
And so we have this sort of experience through the show of kind of seeing it in parts.
Yeah.
And then in that process of exiting back through these rooms, you also sort of get to appreciate the backs of the canvases more.
Yeah.
And I know you were pretty intent as well on making sure that the backs of the canvas was sort of an aspect of the work.
Yeah. They're just attractive, I think, the backs of works. And the little orange, it's all these nice little like happenstance sort of things, like.
The canvas.
Yeah.
What's the term for those? Are they pegs?
What are they? I can't remember what they're called. Wedges. Yeah.
So it was a happy coincidence.
It was a happy coincidence, but then I don't know, maybe it's subconscious.
And you've also made a lovely kind of gesture towards the kind of the audience and to the show of kind of including this booklet as well. And so this is kind of a risograph publication, is that right? So, and I guess it's also worth mentioning, in addition to this body of work, that there's also a separate presentation up at Reading Room of a series of works on paper that you've made. Could you talk a little bit about the interest in sort of producing this separate body of work of the works on paper, the kind of you meant with the show?
I guess it's the studies in a way, like the works on paper are a study of the paintings and things, like it's just playing with the sort of the toolbox of imagery I'd collated, like playing with that on paper. And paper's such an accessible, easy thing to play with, like you can just draw at home after hours or whatever and just have fun playing with it. And because I started in drawing, my background is in drawing, I really feel as if I'm a drawer, which is not really, I guess, a term that's used very much. But just working on paper is a really lovely medium. And then I wanted something that people could take away with them from the show to be accessible. And I know I keep all of like printed matter ephemera at home and often go through it, and all the beautiful shows that I've been lucky to see. Keeping that stuff is really important, I think. And so just creating something that people could take with them. Yeah.
And I wanted to kind of like maybe step back and think a little bit about, I know the first sort of point for you in the development of this was this work, which is kind of a reference to Magritte. What did this work kind of do for you for the development of this kind of the broader body of work?
Well, thinking about language, and I was using the colour orange a lot. So I was thinking about the Magritte work, like this is not a pipe. It's kind of, it's a joke. It's like the language is the authority, denying the image. But then, of course, it is a pipe. It's how we've learnt. It's our education through picture books to learn what objects are through words. So I thought it would be kind of interesting to put this work in the space as like a reminder of language's authority, but also the arbitrary nature of language, that it's like language is arbitrary and it fails in that way. And because I was using orange, I thought it was kind of funny that the colour orange is named after the fruit, not the other way around, which is kind of unusual. So having a figurative orange, the word orange and the colour orange all in the space, like all those different languages at once. Yeah.
And then that kind of leap from this work to kind of these larger works as well. And I guess thinking back to sort of some of the works of yours that came before this, I was curious as well about this process of kind of the raised kind of...
Oh yeah. I've been looking at Viv bins a lot.
and have just come from seeing Viv's show.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So.
But just loving texture and loving sculptural elements. I think in my previous show, Me Say Edit B at Reading Room, I had built up lines in of a notebook page with paint, and it took me months and months. And then I was like, I can just use a medium, and like, it's like much quicker. So yeah, just playing with material and enjoying material. Yeah.
Because it works so beautifully as well with this sort of detail from Louise Bourgeois' Saint Sebastian to kind of communicate almost musculature or
muscles,
movement.
Yeah.
And for me, I guess, as I was kind of looking at this work, it kind of has allusions to almost like the rings of a tree or something like that. It kind of speaks to kind of time or passing of time a little bit.
Yeah.
Well. How did you come across this work of Bourgeois?
I've always really loved it. I think it's from the mid-90s, right? It's a print, like a dry point print. And I always assumed it was I'm sure it is as well, a pregnant woman. But then when I read it was Saint Sebastian, it was like, I had this whole idea of it in my head, maybe a narrative that I'd written, which I'm sure she was part of it as well. And then I was thinking about entropy and how, like something that's anti-entropic is growth. So, the growth of animals, growth of plants. And so pregnancy is an anti-entropic state. So just kind of, going down one of those rabbit holes of thought and ended up making this work. Yeah.
In some of the research for the writing of the essay, I was really quite taken by some of the descriptions of Bourgeois' work and the kind of retelling of, Saint Sebastian as this figure kind of shot by arrows, tied to kind of tree. But here in kind of Bourgeois' retelling, instead of kind of actual arrows, they're sort of schematic arrows. It's like information.
Arrows of time as well.
Experiences and sort of the pressures of time, or maybe the pressures of language upon sort of this woman's body. So it's a really kind of pointed and kind of, I think, appropriate reference in the context of everything else that's going on in this work.
And all the references. So lots of yeah.
I wondered at this point if we might want to open up to the audience to see if anyone has any particular questions for Darcey, any details that kind of caught your eye you wanted to inquire about.
I'm interested in how your mum perceives the work and what are her thoughts on the
Yeah. Well, I talk to her about it all the time, and we talk about entropy and atrophy all the time, of course. And she's at the moment sort of separating the words, like atrophy is atrophy, so it's like a very positive thing. So she's like, which is great. She's got a very positive way of looking at words, and she plays with words in a really fantastic way. But because she has a memory of maybe, between 10 seconds to 2 minutes or something like that, short-term memory, she comes to it new each time, which is interesting, yeah. And she can see her language in the paintings. Like, she'll get excited by, the words, obviously, and I've given her a brick, so she's going to have one by her bed and stuff like that. So, yeah, a trophy. Yeah, so it's an ongoing conversation. Yeah.
I remember you were saying she annotates the paintings when she sees them.
Yeah, she'll correct them. Yeah, well, she was an educator, teacher, so she'll correct things as she sees them, which is not always what I want, like especially on a painting. But no, she'll correct everything and. She has before, yeah. Yeah, which...
And do you retain those marks?
Yeah, I did. I left it on that one, yeah, which I'm going to keep now. Because it's like, yeah, it's interesting because, I didn't ask her to do that. But, it's just what happens, yeah.
The form of the text, because I know you did this in the Spirax kind of work, it's Jen's writing, right? Like, it's her handwriting as in a shape, or do you stylize it?
Well,
like, is it a direct sort of blow up for
no,
handwriting?
well, I think it's interesting because she taught me how to draw. I have a very similar hand to her hand, so we've got very similar handwriting.
The question part was like writing in the way that she writes.
Yeah.
How do you feel doing that? Almost like embodying.
Sort of. I kind of just play with it, like it's a pattern device. Like the letters are just patterning, kind of. At first, when I first started doing it years ago, I kind of felt like I was forging a check or something. Like it kind of felt like, because I was looking at her writing so intently and then painting it, kind of felt interesting. But now it feels fluid and just patterning and not thinking too much. Yeah.
I think for me that's where the kind of interest in concrete poetry and the kind of shape and form isn't. It's not necessarily always about the kind of, I guess, the meaning of the language. Perhaps not to say that it isn't, but of course that's central. But
and that's why I have the PDF there to just guide me, and as I, so I'm not thinking about what I'm writing too much. It's just like visual.
It's a form of kind of gesture or
Yeah.
Been trying to formulate a comment into a question.
You can comment.
It's quite interesting. I was in the NGV quiz show the other day, and they've got a copy of the Saint Sebastian in there, which is just such a fantastic coincidence.
I know. I haven't seen it yet. I've got to go see it. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
the first time I've seen it as well.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about, well, in one way, the remaking of work is kind of trying to be anti-tropic by like rebirthing or reproducing something. But then more broadly, you seem to draw in a lot of different artists into your work. I wonder how you think about that reproduction of ideas and techniques in your own work. Is there a conscious thing, or is it just something that being an artist you see a lot in you?
I just think, it's just a natural thing. I haven't thought about it too much. I guess it's part of that way of researching, of creating this toolbox of images and then using them. And in a way, I guess I'm using Mum's language, so it's like I'm taking, her language and then my language of art history, or my education of art history and art. So it's like kind of that combination, which is like been the sort of the conscious thought around the appropriation. And I guess just from really enjoying all those works.
And I know you mentioned as well the orange with, like, there's figures like Ellsworth Kelly and John Nixon as well. And
absolutely.
And so having that sort of interest in love, and that, as you said, like it's a language that you are invested in, art history and art, and seeing art and drawing those connections together.
Yeah, the visual language of it all. Yeah.
Amazing. Any last questions before we wrap up?
Cool.
Thanks so much, Darcey,
Thank
for
you.
joining us today.
Thank you all.